Roland Barthes, The Death of the Author. In his story Sarracine, Balzac, describing a castrato disguised as a woman, writes the following sentence. This was woman herself, with her sudden fears, her irrational whims, her instinctive worries, her impetuous boldness, her fussings, and her delicious sensibility. Who is speaking thus? Is it the hero of the story, bent on remaining ignorant of the castrato hidden beneath the woman? Is it Balzac, the individual, furnished by his personal experience with a philosophy of woman? Is it Balzac, the author, professing literary ideas on femininity? Is it universal wisdom? Romantic psychology? We shall never know, for the good reason that writing is the destruction of every voice, of every point of origin. Writing is that neutral, composite, oblique space where our subject slips away, the negative where all identity is lost, starting with the very identity of the body writing. No doubt it has always been that way. As soon as a fact is narrated, no longer with a view to acting directly on reality, but intransitively, that is to say, finally outside of any function other than that of the very practice of the symbol itself, this disconnection occurs. The voice loses its origin, the author enters into his own death. Writing begins. The sense of this phenomenon, however, has varied. In ethnographic societies, the responsibility for a narrative is never assumed by a person, but by a mediator, a shaman, or relator, whose performance, the mastery of the narrative code, may possibly be admired, but never his genius. The author is a modern figure, a product of our society insofar as, emerging from the Middle Ages with English empiricism, French rationalism, and the personal faith of the Reformation, it discovered the prestige of the individual, of, as it is more nobly put, the human person. It is thus logical that in literature it should be this positivism, the epitome and culmination of capitalist ideology, which has attached the greatest importance to the person of the author. Though the sway of the author remains powerful, the new criticism has often done no more than consolidate it. It goes without saying that certain writers have long since attempted to loosen it. In France, Mallarmé was doubtless the first to see and to foresee in its full extent the necessity to substitute language itself for the person who until then had been supposed to be its owner. For him, for us too, it is language which speaks, not the author. To write is, through a prerequisite impersonality, not at all to be confused with the castrating objectivity of the realist novelist, to reach that point where only language acts, performs, and not me. Mallarmé's entire poetics consists in suppressing the author in the interests of writing, which is, as will be seen, to restore the place of the reader. Linguistically, the author is never more than the instance writing, just as I is nothing other than the instant saying I. Language knows a subject, not a person, and this subject, empty outside of the very enunciation which defines it, suffices to make language hold together, suffices, that is to say, to exhaust it. The removal of the author. One could talk here with Brecht of a veritable distancing, the author diminishing like a figurine at the far end of the literary stage, is not merely an historical fact or an act of writing. It utterly transforms the modern text, or, which is the same thing, the text is henceforth made and read in such a way that at all its levels the author is absent. The temporality is different. The author, when believed in, is always conceived of as the past of his own book. Book and author stand automatically on a single line, divided into a before and an after. The author is thought to nourish the book, which is to say that he exists before it, thinks, suffers, lives for it, is in the same relation of antecedence to his work as a father to his child. In complete contrast, the modern scripter is born simultaneously with the text, is in no way equipped with a being preceding or exceeding the writing, is not the subject with the book as predicate. There is no other time than that of the Annunciation, and every text is eternally written here and now. The fact is, or it follows, that writing can no longer designate an operation of recording, notation, representation, depiction, as the classics would say. Rather, it designates exactly what linguists, referring to Oxford philosophy, call a performative, a rare verbal form, exclusively given in the first person and in the present tense, in which the enunciation has no other content, contains no other proposition, than the act by which it is uttered. Something like the I declare of kings, or the I sing of very ancient poets. Having buried the author, the modern scripter can thus no longer believe, as according to the pathetic view of his predecessors, that this hand is too slow for his thought or passion, and that, consequently, making a law of necessity, he must emphasize this delay and indefinitely polish his form. For him, on the contrary, the hand, cut off from any voice, born by a pure gesture of inscription and not of expression, traces a field without origin, or which, at least, has no other origin than language itself, language which ceaselessly calls into question all origins. We now know that a text is not a line of words releasing a single theological meaning, the message of the author God, but a multidimensional space in which a variety of writing, none of them original, blend and clash. The text is a tissue of quotations drawn from the innumerable centers of culture. Similar to Bouvard and Pécuchet, those eternal copists, at once sublime and comic, and whose profound ridiculousness indicates precisely the truth of writing. The writer can only imitate a gesture that is always anterior, never original. His only power is to mix writings, to counter the ones with the others, in such a way as never to rest on any one of them. Did he wish to express himself, he ought at least to know that the inner thing he thinks to translate is itself only a ready-formed dictionary, its words only explainable through other words, and so on indefinitely. Succeeding the author, the scripter no longer bears with him passions, humors, feelings, impressions, but rather this immense dictionary from which he draws a writing that can know no halt. Life never does more than imitate the book, and the book itself is only a tissue of signs, an imitation that is lost, indefinitely deferred. Once the author is removed, the claim to decipher a text becomes quite futile. To give a text an author is to impose a limit on that text, to furnish it with a final signified, to close the writing. Such a conception suits criticism very well, the latter then allotting itself the important task of discovering the author beneath the work, or its hypostasis, society, history, psyche, liberty. When the author has been found, the text is explained. Victory to the critic. Hence, there is no surprise in the fact that, historically, the reign of the author has also been that of the critic, nor again in the fact that criticism, be it new, is today undermined along with the author. In the multiplicity of writing, everything is to be disentangled, nothing deciphered. The structure can be followed, run like the thread of a stocking, at every point and at every level, but there is nothing beneath. The space of writing is to be ranged over, not pierced. Writing ceaselessly posits meaning, ceaselessly to evaporate it, carrying out a systematic exemption of meaning. In precisely this way, literature, it would be better from now to say writing, by refusing to assign a secret, an ultimate meaning to the text and to the world as text, liberates what may be called an anti-theological activity, an activity that is truly revolutionary, since to refuse to fix meaning is, in the end, to refuse God and his hypostasis, reason, science, law. Let us come back to the Balzac sentence. No one, no person says it. Its source, its voice, is not the true place of the writing which is reading. The reader is the space on which all the quotations that make up a writing are inscribed, without any of them being lost. A text's unit lies not in its origin, but in its destination. Yet this destination cannot any longer be personal. The reader is without history, biography, psychology. He is simply that someone who holds together in a single field all the traces by which the written text is constituted. Which is why it is derisory to condemn the new writing in the name of a humanism hypocritically turned champion of the reader's rights. Classic criticism has never paid any attention to the reader. For it, the writer is the only person in literature. We are now beginning to let ourselves be fooled no longer by the arrogant anti-phrastical recriminations of good society in favor of the very thing it sets aside, ignores, smothers, or destroys. We know that to give writing its future, it is necessary to overthrow the myth. The birth of the reader must be at the cost of the death of the author.